Before House Democrats left town last week, two long-serving and high-ranking colleagues, Representatives Charlie Rangel, a Democrat from New York, and Maxine, a Democrat from California, were brought up on ethics charges. Now everyone's gone home and they won't be given a chance to clear their name until September. Meanwhile, is there a rush to judgment? Congressman Chakah Fattah thinks so. He's a former member of the Ethics Committee and a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, and he joins me now. Welcome, Congressman. You've been home now for a couple of days, and I wondered what you thought, what the reaction's been from your constituents to the ethics cases.
Well, I've not heard one of my constituents ask about it. They're much more focused on some of the larger challenges facing the country, Afghanistan, the fiscal crisis, and also in terms of jobs and the rollout of the health care bill. But rather than a rush to judgment, what we've seen to have had in the Washington community is really a rush to ask these two members to vacate any opportunity to clear their name. That is, to somehow fall on their sword and not take up the cause of answering allegations that have been brought against them, which is a fairly American thing to do. That is that we usually have what we call due process, in which, allegations are made, people have an opportunity to put aside their point of view. And so in the case of Congressman Rangel, he asked the Ethics Committee to investigate these rumors or these issues that have been raised in terms of his reputation. And they did an investigation over 2 years. They come forward now with some specific areas where they believe he may have broken the House rules. And he has an opportunity in September to actually answer those in a proceeding before the Ethics Committee. And what seemed to have happened was people were suggesting that he should just, quit, go home, and not take up the cause of answering the allegations. And that just didn't make a lot of sense to me.
Congressman, do you see that pressure coming from his colleagues? Some have called for his resignation. There's been returning some of his campaign donations. Is that where this pressure is coming from?
Well, we've had 8 of our colleagues who said that he should step down, but it's mainly been the media. I don't mean to be critical of the media, but with this very loose interpretation of what's going on. Number one, that you've had people say he's been found guilty, or or that these you have people mischaracterizing the actual alleged rule violations. So.
But do you think the media has been the one saying he should leave? That seems, the media can get it wrong, surely they have, but it seems, what would their motivation be for him stepping down?
Well, when I because I'm not a media basher, but I think the point of attack was, well, this is going to be terrible for Democrats if there's a trial or a hearing on these allegations, and that Rangel should do something to alleviate the spectacle of him being able to answer allegations that have been brought forward. He is the member of Congress who, for the first time in the history of the Congress, actually asked the Ethics Committee to investigate. Now, I served 6 years on the House Ethics. We don't have members coming forward saying, would you please investigate me, right?
Right.
So here's a man who served for 40 years and is much more interested in what his grandchildren and children are going to think about him if he doesn't answer these allegations, because it would leave the appearance that he believes he did something wrong. And so I think that, and when you get into the nuances of these issues, you can see where Chairman Rangel has an actual point of view. That is to say that when you deal with what the allegation is and what his response is, you can see that they absolutely, he needs to have an opportunity to defend himself. And so, I think that's the issue, and I think any member of the House, including Maxine, you see it in the case of, which has not gotten a lot of attention, but Senator Ensign, who today, announced a legal defense fund. He's facing criminal charges with or a criminal investigation with the Justice Department.
But Congressman, I want to just get back to this pressure point, because one thing we find in our reporting is you do talk to Democrats worried about the election this year. They worry about a trial. And that there does seem to be pressure coming from Democrats for Congressman Rangel and Congressman Waters to kind of clear this up, make some kind of a deal. And so I just want to get your sense on I get that it's coming, maybe you say, from the press, but characterize for me the pressure they're getting or that you see from other Democrats in the House.
Well, I said that 8 of his colleagues have called for him. I'm not leaving them out.
But is that
I think
it,
that
just
first
8?
and foremost, what you have is a desire for instance, for Chairman Rangel or Maxine Waters to admit that they've done something wrong and accept the judgment of the committee. In the case of the Ethics Committee, they wanted to have a reprimand on Chairman Rangel, which is the weakest of all of the various punishments. And I think they assumed that this would be a way in which there could be a basis for settlement. But you settle cases when they create more aggravation than it's worth to defend yourself. In Chairman Rangel's point of view, having a permanent stain on his legacy or his work is much more problematic if he were to admit that he's done something wrong. Now what he says is, look, I've made mistakes. I've had didn't pay enough attention to this or that, but that in terms of intentionally violating any rules, he doesn't admit that he's done that. And I think when you look at his response, you can see that he has a point of view that should be heard by a deliberative body.
Congressman, let me ask you, what did you make of the president's remarks about Charlie Rangel?
I thought the president said essentially what I'm saying, which is that Charlie Rangel served the nation very well, that these charges need to be aired out, and that he assumes that what Mr. Rangel wants to do is to be able to leave the Congress eventually with his good name intact, and that he hopes, as the president said, he hopes that there will be an opportunity for him to do that. So there's no possibility of him leaving with his good name intact with these charges being unanswered. And the way we get to facts in our country, even if you're a member of Congress, you actually get a chance to answer allegations that have been brought against you.
Some people read the president's remarks as a kind of gentle shove out the door for Congressman Rangel. You didn't see it that way?
Absolutely not. In fact, the president's spokesperson, Bill Burton, clarified even more so that on yesterday. That's because people were trying to push a particular narrative, which was that Rangel should resign, Rangel should admit to whatever would be necessary so that there wouldn't be a hearing, that somehow he was going to damage the cause of Democrats. I don't see, where is the suggestion that Senator Ensign, in a criminal investigation with the Justice Department, should resign or step down, or where's the hammering of the Republicans on that? We have hundreds of Democratic members of Congress, and if one of them or 2 of them or 10 of them are going through an ethics process, it doesn't somehow besmirch my good name or someone else's, nor should we ever assume that someone like Chairman Rangel, who actually fought on behalf of this country in the Korean War so that we could all have the right to answer allegations, that somehow he should forfeit it.
Let me ask you this. You mentioned narrative. There's another narrative out here that this is about race, that, you look at the 2 people being investigated by the Ethics Committee, and they're both African Americans. What's your sense of that?
I don't believe that race has any part of this. First of all, I know the members of the Ethics Committee. I know the leadership of the committee, both the Democrats and the Republican leaders of the committee. I don't think race has anything. What happens is that allegations are brought forward. If there's a prima facie case, then members are brought to account. Sometimes it's through a private reprimand, sometimes through a public reprimand. But many times what the facts may seem to be don't always pan out. And I think that when you look at the issues here, I'm willing to bet you that I think that Chairman Rangel will be able to clear his good name, because when you get into the details, there's been very little reporting on the actual statement of alleged violations and the actual response to the allegations as brought. I haven't seen anyone go out and do interviews of the people involved in this. So there's been all this talk, but very little actual investigative work on it.
Quickly, 2 last thoughts. Do you think Congresswoman Waters will also be cleared in the proceedings ahead?
There's no stronger advocate in the Congress for women and minority-owned financial services firms, banks, and investment banking firms than Maxine Waters. I've read through the allegations. I've looked at her response. And, if you characterize to 1,000 people what she's been alleged to have done, and what the facts are, 1,000 to 1,000 would have it wrong.
So you think she'll be
at a meeting. She was never at a meeting advocating on behalf of this particular bank. And I think when we get through the facts, I think what you have here is you had a desire for the Ethics Committee to wrap this work up. You need to know, and your viewers need to know, that these matters can't extend beyond the current term. So you have a window in which these things have to be resolved. And one of the ways that you try to resolve them is you try to resolve them with some kind of settlement. And when members push back and say, we're not going to settle, we don't believe we did anything wrong, let's have a hearing, then you had this push to say, well, somehow that'll be bad for politics. I think what would be bad for politics for the Democratic Party is to have these matters swept under the rug so that anyone can mischaracterize them. Why don't we have a hearing? And in fact, for journalists, you should be welcoming the notion of a hearing with all the facts on the table, with all the testimony on the table, so you can actually work through this and find out who has done wrong, if in fact wrong has been done.
So, Congressman, just to button this up, you think she'll be cleared?
Well, I don't want to prejudge any of it except to say that from my reading of it, I don't think there's any there. Oh, there's no benefit. There's no, to her. The Treasury says that nothing resulted from the meeting that was had. And Senator Kerry and Barney Franks had staff in the meeting. She was not in the meeting. It was a meeting called on behalf of all of the nation's minority-owned banks, right? Not just the one that her husband had investments in. So I think when you get down to the details, I think what they wanted was for these matters just to be somehow go away quietly. And I think members have a right to stand up, and they shouldn't face the threat of political retribution because they want to clear their name. Right. You had said that Charlie Rangel would be cleared. I just wanted to give you the opportunity to extend that same. I think that she'll be cleared also. Okay. And I think that what has happened is that there's been this notion that somehow because there's an allegation, there's guilt. Okay, Congressman, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks so much for being with us. Thank you.